Welcome to a pre-recorded webinar, The Benefits of Hosted Managed Services, featuring Tyler Frenzel from DELMIAworks. We hope you enjoy the webinar.
Hello everyone, I'm Tyler Frenzel. I'm the Director of Cloud Operations for DELMIAworks. Today we'll be talking about what is Hosted Managed Services, HMS as we like to call it. You'll get a chance to meet the team. You'll learn about what makes HMS possible and our 3 pillars of success. You'll learn about how these pillars of success add to quality of life and savings for your business. You'll learn about what's new and what's coming. And you'll learn how to get started with HMS, followed by Q&A. So a little bit about me. I've been in professional IT for about 16 years now. 6 of those years with DELMIAworks, 4 of those years in cloud operations, and acting as director for the last 2 years. So I've been here a little while. I've previously consulted for Boingo Wireless, Tech Systems, and Bank of America, to name a few. And in my free time, I'm a musician. This is actually me drumming at the Viper Room in LA quite a few years ago, but still one of the better photos. So let's jump into it. Hosted Managed Services. What is it and its overview? So HMS is a highly reliable, secure, and effective deployment methodology to run and manage DELMIAworks. Short and simple, we basically lift all the responsibilities of that infrastructure required to run the software over to our team of highly qualified engineers. We can focus on the deployment of the ERP system, so your IT teams can focus back on your business needs, their goals and ambitions, instead of worrying about hosting the ERP solution for you. So in short, we handle the cloud infrastructure so you can execute your business vision and strategy. So why hosted managed services? So our mission, first and foremost, we are designed to keep your business running first and always. With us, you'll have a lower initial investment and less long-term costs for the solution. Since we leverage modern day cloud hosting, this prevents end-of-life hardware hurdles that your IT team might be struggling with today. With that cloud infrastructure, we also have scalability. We can fit your needs and growth, and it frees up more efficient use of your IT resources. So I mentioned this a little earlier in the agenda, our 3 pillars of success. This is how we deploy and build HMS and make it successful. So first and foremost, we got our services and support team. We have a team of highly qualified engineers that are here to keep your business performing. We handle all the services that you'll need, your reloads, your backups, your upgrades, maintenance, the hosting, and more. So that's our first pillar. Our second pillar is the hosting itself. So we'll host the cloud infrastructure required to run it. It's accessible, secure, and assisted with Microsoft remote desktop services, remote applications, and our new web client. In our third piece, we manage and monitor the environment. So we'll manage the HMS environment, provide 24/7 monitoring dashboards. It gives your business peace of mind. You can focus on what matters most to you, using the software and not hosting it. So let's jump into the first one, our services and support team. So you've already met me on the right as the Director of Cloud Operations. Chris Smallwood is our Vice President of Cloud Operations. He's my leadership team. Under our operations, we have Stephen Breen. He handles our DevOps, a lot of the architecture and deployment of the systems. We have Gretchen DeCou on the right. She's our Financial Operations Officer. And then we have our services and engineering team. From left to right, Paul Arbogast, he's our system engineer. He builds out a lot of the new customer environments, lift and shift customers, and he's generally the first point of contact that you'll have with our team on getting your environment up and running. On the right and middle, Chandra Seeds and Kyle Yeba are our services engineer. They're our daily task force that are there to support and provide services for your business. So all of these team members, they're experts in deployment. No one knows DELMIAworks like DELMIAworks engineers. That's simply put. We've been handling the software always. So let our engineers handle the complexity of the infrastructure, relieves your team of the stress, the hardware requirements, and the learning curve of deployment. you'll get started faster, simply put. We also handle customer-tailored environments to fit your business needs, while performance tuning advancements come into play as well. So as your team grows, your business and your needs, if you add more sites, more locations, we're here to grow with you and keep the environment performant. So let's jump into the next piece. So infrastructure. So Outscale is our main cloud IaaS provider. It's very similar to solutions like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Azure. So we move the IT hardware required to run DELMIAworks into a secure and sophisticated virtual cloud network. So we've been with DS for a while now. Being part of DS, we have access to Outscale. So Outscale is another company that's part of the DS umbrella. They help us provide the backbone. DELMIAworks is huge. It's a very expansive software suite. There's a lot of different hosting requirements, nuances here and there about getting started with the software, different needs for your business, So Outscale is really flexible and helps us host every single aspect of the software. So they're secure, they're scalable, they're compliant. It's really a match made in heaven for us. They give us a lot of benefits with hosting with one of our own partner companies. So speaking of benefits, because we partner with Outscale, we have a competitive edge over other providers such as AWS and Azure, with savings up to 45%. This means that there's more money in your pockets to run your business, right? So we take our savings, we pass it on to you. Outscale is global and they're growing every day. They're largely based in the US. We heavily leverage the East Coast and West Coast data centers currently. We do have a customer in Europe today, and we're looking to expand further in the future as well. So we have a shared vision of becoming global and look forward to building that presence with Outscale. Outscale also has a large support and services network to keep us up and running. This is something that has been really great for us, unlike other competitive IaaS solutions, right? So traditionally, we used to use AWS. Today, we're deploying an Outscale because we have that close relationship with them. They can really help us get to the heart of an issue quickly and prevent long-term outages, right? We have a direct line to those engineers that are right there in the data center or right there watching and monitoring the environments, right? So this has been a significant point of interest for us. It's never been better, really, with them. So we're really happy to have them, not even to mention all the certifications that they provide right out of the gate for us. Cloud privacy protection, cloud security, Citrix, Net Intel, cloud technology, like all these things play a big hand in keeping these environments up and running and to the T. So another part of our infrastructure is backups, recovery, and site reliability. So Outscale helps us perform all the backups. We do full backups twice a day, weekly backups and monthly backups. We keep those encrypted and stored. So if you ever need to restore a backup or review old data for posterity, we have that handled. It's all stored in Outscale encrypted. We also, on top of that, provide snapshots of the environment. That's all maintained in Outscale as well. We can do daily on demand, so we have some redundancy there. Outscale also helps us provide redundant connections, border gateway protocol, VPNs. They're global. So we'll work with your engineers to make sure that we have a solid connection to the environment that's redundant, and that's all powered through Outscale. Another new solution that we announced last year is our warm site disaster recovery. With this, we can keep you up and running even faster than relying on one of the backup methodologies above, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So right here, warm site disaster recovery. As a service, we provide a secondary site. This is all hosted in Outscale again. The secondary site will come online if a failure is detected. We have sophisticated monitoring, which we will talk about in a little bit ahead here. But basically, we can detect a event or a failure and fail over to the swarm site available environment. So the data is mirrored between the primary and secondary database with as little as 5 minutes or less of data loss. And depending on the situation and what we use to trigger those events, that failover to get connected could take as little as 30 to 60 minutes to migrate to the failover environment. So that's very quick compared to previous RTOs and RPOs that we provide in the past. We also provide standard and enterprise solutions for this. So a standard one being a little bit more accessible for smaller business, and the enterprise option being a full one-to-one environment. So a little bit more on that. So our standard disaster recovery builds upon existing backup capabilities within HMS. It's a refined copy of the production environment, mostly meant around your critical players who needs to get in the environment right away in the event of a failover. It's designed to be lean and to keep things affordable and available, whereas our enterprise disaster recovery will mirror the entire environment, right? Whatever you need to keep you running, we'll make a one-to-one environment. It'll handle all aspects of the environment and keep your whole business running at full capacity. So these were new. They were announced last year. We still provide those today. And we're looking forward to having more customers with this in the future. So make sure if you guys are interested in warm site disaster recovery that you mention it to your CSMs. So we'll get into that a little bit later as well. So here's a small diagram of what the standard environment looks like today. This is without disaster recovery. So we handle the remote desktop solutions, the web hosting, load balancing. If you're familiar with our product, the master home, workflows, all aspects are right there. Your alert environment, your Oracle database, connections to the environment. We handle a domain in the environment as well. That's powered through Microsoft Active Directory. So I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but this is kind of a high level of diagram of what the environment would look like. Compared to a warm site disaster recovery, we have a lot more going on here, right? So this is more of a one-to-one environment. You got a primary site and a standby site. So Outscale is what really helps us make this all possible, because it's very easy for us to clone and replicate items in the primary site to the standby site, keep those in sync and keep those hosted for you. And on the bottom here, we can see a lot of what the customer network might look like at a high level and connecting up to those environments. So speaking of on-site, there are a few requirements to get started. Being a cloud product, obviously you're going to need an internet connection. Generally, we provide a few different ways to get into the environment, but you always need the internet. We prefer a fiber line or a business class ISP if possible. 50 MIPS up and down is pretty common these days, if not higher. And we're seeing higher speeds across the United States every day. So that's what's recommended right now. We've had success with even a little bit lower. It really just depends on your needs. Offsite locations with just a warehouse might not need this exactly that speed. So talk to us, let us know what you guys are bringing, and we'll let you know if it'll work out and whatnot. We have readiness assessments available whenever you're looking to move. A part of this is there are some items that are still required for secure connectivity and also for speed and performance. So VPN capable firewall for your corporate network, for scan guns. If you're familiar with RT server or RTPM, real-time process monitoring, those sort of things would still need to be on site. Obviously, we can't host a scan gun. You need to be able to touch and interact with the scan gun on the floor and securely connect up to the environment, right? So network printing and label printing along with that, if we could lift and shift your printers to the cloud, we would. Unfortunately, it's not a reality today. There still has to be a little bit of a physical presence on site. But that's mostly going to be your client workstations, right? Hopefully with a modern operating system, Windows 10, But there's not really anything else that we need to have on-prem, right? We host the entirety of the software suite today. There's nothing that's off limits with HMS. So we're going to jump into our second pillar here, third pillar, managed and monitored. So we design these environments with security in mind. Part of that was the VPNs we just touched on, endpoint encryption, secure access, industry best practices on those. We provide 24/7 monitoring with Logic Monitor. This has been really the heart of our monitoring solution. We get up-to-date responses on ping, the memory usage, CPU, storage, database availability, table space. It does our SLA reporting as well. A lot of this is at the time that we need it, it is up to date in there and ready and available. It has a lot of historical data in it too. So this tool is just really, really valuable to us. Being a hosted solution, we can schedule downtime, maintenance, and updates. With the managed piece, there's a lot of aspects of the software that you might have to put your hands on something more technical than maybe you're used to, right? So we try to take away as many of those complex situations as possible and take care of those for you. So if you need an update, if you need to migrate systems, that's the sort of thing we're talking about here. We can schedule that time with you, work around your schedule. We never force updates on anybody. We do like that most people come with the mindset of upgrading to the latest software suite. There's always new features and capabilities in the newer software suites. DW 2021 was released earlier this year, and we have a few customers on that software version, DW 2020X as well. With those newer aspects like WebIQ come into play, and there's new hosting requirements for those. So that deploying these systems and then monitoring those and developing them out, that's really our bread and butter. So we have another tool with Logic Monitor that we use to monitor the environments called PagerDuty. So PagerDuty is a tool that's we use for critical infrastructure blocker issues. It's our 24/7 line, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So let's go into Logic Monitor a little bit more. So HMS, we have a 99.5% uptime for infrastructure and database availability. In actuality, we're actually sitting around 99.95. So even higher than our guarantee. Some may ask why that is. It's really the outscale piece is what's keeping us up there on the uptime. 99.5 is pretty standard. You'll see that pretty much everywhere. But 99.95 is even better, right? So we guarantee the industry standard, but we outperform it by quite a bit. That comes in hand with the proactive monitoring that we use. We get custom tailored alerts on the environment. I kind of touched on that before, the ping, CPU research, CPU storage. So anytime those sort of things are coming to a state that we would see a warning, like let's say you have a system that's operating at 90% CPU usage, that performance impact might hit your business in some way. And so we get alarms around that to make sure that we're reviewing the environment, we're making sure that there's nothing that's causing that issue, or we're adding storage to the environment or clearing up things that may cause a blocker in the future, right? So table space is one of those things that if you are an on-prem customer, you're probably used to this. At some point, your user's table space or maybe your database runs out of space. So we monitor those, make sure that we're adding that space as needed before that becomes an issue and before that error message ever appears on your screen. So now a lot of these tools we use internally, but a lot of these can also be used by your team We give you customer facing dashboards so you can see all the resources of the environment, what's happening, what's going on. You can ask us questions about it. I got an example of some of what our alarms look like here. So alerts and warnings. So we're proactive. Like I've talked about this before. Here's some examples of some of the issues that we would see. So if a server is having ping issues, memory issues, even stuck printer jobs, and that's even printers that are on your on-prem network, right? Access to the master home, keeping sure that's up, and table space. I kind of touched on those as well. So you actually get access to what these warnings look like and before they even hit a critical or an alarm state. Some of the dashboards are shown here. So we do require that VPN for some sources on site. So we can monitor that VPN. So that's on the left here. We can see if there's ping loss, when it happens, generally what that looks like over time. CPU usage across all the nodes, making sure nothing's really spiking really high, and memory usage on the right. So these are just a few examples of some of the monitor tools that you can also see to review your environment and gives you a little bit more peace of mind. And then as these approach a warning threshold, we have PagerDuty, right? So this is our 24/7 emergency hotline. This is a phone number you get for your team to use if you have anything that you deem a critical or blocker level issue that our monitoring solution might not catch. We don't always have eyes on the ground, right? So if you have, maybe you need to add a new label printer and get things printed and shipped out the door, right? Right in that moment, a printer could become a blocker level issue. Give us a ring and we'll work through that with you. If there are any critical alarms that are raised from Logic Monitor, it will also ring that on-call team member. So using the same resource, right? So there's always someone available 24/7 to jump in and knock out any issues that might be causing your business any kind of grief. So perfect tool for business blockers any time of the day. There's also multiple escalations on this. I'm also on this escalation path. Right, so we have people from level 1 all the way up to level 3. So we will always have someone available to take that call for you. So let's jump into the future and what's coming. So 2020 was a hard year for everyone. Some of the things that we put out in the last year was designed to keep businesses up and running. In this year, we are improving upon those and adding more security. So what was new in 2020? So we talked about warm site failover from SMB to enterprise options. So if you had any sort of failover with a site, we keep you up and running. So that was a really big one for us in 2020. Another piece that was very critical to the success over the pandemic was our new web client with Windows Server 2019. This not only provided modern browser access to the HMS environment, but access from anywhere. So I'm sure your company can probably relate where you had to make a huge shift to working remotely. So traditionally, we secured many environments down to just the corporate network. We keep things secure that way. With this new tool, we're able to open up more access to the environment remotely from anywhere. People work from home, people on the road, people working, maybe they're stuck somewhere and they can't really get into the environment. This is kind of more traditional, right? You're in a coffee shop, you're in the heat of the moment, you're out and about. So this helped keep people connected reliably and securely. So that was pretty huge. And then of course, with the pandemic, there was a lot of companies that had to invest in work from home capabilities, providing employees hardware, VPN devices or otherwise to securely access their corporate network from anywhere, right? I mean, I'm doing this webinar still in my house. So this tool really helped us keep up and running. And we have a few customers that heavily leverage this, and I'm sure they could be in a lot harder spots without it, right? So I'm really happy we got that one in there. So for the new year, so we're working on security enhancements is our big goal this year. Some of these things we've already put into play, some of these things that we are currently working towards. So security enhancements, first and foremost, we enabled TLS 1.2 encryption earlier this year. So we always want your environment to be completely secure, wherever you're accessing it from. I mean, it's all over the internet, right? So you want to make sure that you're protected. So on top of that, we are looking into system and organizational controls, most commonly known as SOC. So the SOC controls are really going to help us make sure that we're adhering to best practices, securing your environment the way that the rest of the world would expect it to be secure. And then on top of that, using best practice solutions from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, so NIST, most formally known as. So those two things are really going to help push us into more advanced security in the future. FedRAMP being one of them, Department of Defense, those sort of things where there are a lot of contracts involved and a lot of auditing and visibility of the networks and security. And so these things are really going to help us get there. So we started the research already this year. We've already been implementing a lot of the best practices that are falling into these two items here. And then we're aiming to be completed by the end of 2021. So what else? Our team is growing. A lot of companies, they had to let a lot of people go over during the pandemic, save money, cut teams, and lean them out. We're really grateful that in DS, we did not have to do that, mostly because of our uptime and availability. None of our customers really took a day off. Everyone still had access to their environments. So with that, luckily, our team did not suffer in any way. But this year, we're looking to vastly expand our team. So we talked about the team a little bit earlier. They handle a lot of the services and management of the environment, the monitoring, the 24/7 support. So I'm really happy that we're going to, in this new year, add and grow our team. It means more resources available to you, more flexibility for customizations and controls of your network, keep things up and running. So really excited about these coming forward. This is a big kind of leap into quality of life. So keeping the quality of the product eye strong and secure. So really excited for this year. So how to get started with HMS? You're going to want to talk to our sales team today. This can be for if you're a new customer coming in, even if you're an existing customer and might be hosting it yourself or on-prem, we'd love to have you. If you're already hosting it yourself, just contact your CSM. We can talk about how and what it would take to lift and shift your environment to HMS. And we do environmental configs and quotes all the time. Doesn't matter, small, big, large, however your business runs, we should be able to fit it into our hosted managed services environment. So just contact your CSM today. We got readiness assessments ready and waiting. So with that, I'm going to open up Q&A. So Leah, do we have any questions so far?
Yes, thank you, Tyler. Great job. We do have a couple questions, and just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please submit them in the chat area, and we can get those answered. But our first question is, what are the recommendations around internet connectivity?
Right, so as we touched on before, having a fiber line or a redundant internet connection is best. Being a cloud solution, the internet is always going to be your gateway up to the hosted environment. So having a strong connection there or redundant connection is always great. We provide a few different options for redundant connections, whether it be multiple VPNs, certain VPN options. But yeah, having that strong fiber backbone is going to be very important. Even if fiber is not an option, cable lines like DOCSIS 3 are still good. The biggest thing is as long as it's a business line, mostly because those business lines will guarantee an SLA on your connection. And that's very important for, as long as your ISP is available, we're available, right? So a strong internet backbone is always good.
Thank you. Another question from the audience is HMS available in the UK?
So currently, we are focusing mostly on North America. We do have the ability to host in Europe. We will be looking to adding options for that in the future pretty quickly. The biggest kind of issue we have around hosting in the UK currently is around our support hours. So while we have 24/7 support, we're primarily focused on North America right now. With our team growing and expanding, like I just touched on, it does open up options for more of a global presence and hosting elsewhere. Right now, I don't believe we would be offering the UK, but reach out to sales, let's talk, and maybe we can make it work for you.
Great, thank you, Tyler. Our next question is, how do you handle performance tuning or issues that you might see?
So that's a good question. A lot of the performance metrics we have in Logic Monitor, so we can track the CPU usage, the RAM usage over time. There's a few things that we leverage out of the Oracle instance directly that hosts the database for performance tuning reports. We also take largely into consideration the size of your company, how many users you have, how many active connections. So as you grow or maybe add a plant and you're adding more connections, we review to make sure that that fits in the environment that we propose and host for you. With that, the Oracle reporting really helps us out in showing us like, hey, maybe your connections are pretty low, but maybe the way you're utilizing the product is intensive, or maybe you do more reporting than a different customer might would. And so with that reporting out of Oracle, we can really tell where the bottleneck is and what needs to be increased and upgraded. So all those things, our team of engineers are very qualified to look over, review, maintain. So Logic Monitor really helps us out there. In the event that we do need to scale up, there's a lot of different avenues and roads for that. It really depends on the circumstance. If you're just adding a new plant and more users, maybe we just need to expand the environment on where they're connecting to. If it's something like you're an existing customer and you're not happy with your performance on-prem today, maybe it's because the size of your database isn't designed to fit in the infrastructure you host it on. So we have pretty good algorithms built out to identify, hey, I'm hosting a database of this size. What size container instance hosting do we need on our side? What does that trend look like over time? When can we see an increase in resources? So all that stuff we track and monitor daily.
Great. We have another question. When DELMIAworks releases a full web client, will hosted managed services leverage the web client? And if so, how?
So we have two versions today that use WebIQ, which can be accessible directly all through the web. So we can provide hosting for that today. In the future, if we move towards more of only a web client model, then yeah, we'd still provide the backbone and hosting for that. Generally, if you have a perpetual license or you do the hosting yourself, you would still need some sort of hosting server for that for WebIQ today. In the future, we have plans to integrate with the platform with 3DS. So we are in talks with R&D on what it would take to provide the hosting and the backbone for that as well. So we are not going away anytime soon, whether it be WebIQ or a full web client in the future. And for some models, there's still going to be some customers that rely on, more of a traditional hosting solution. Like we never force upgrades on our end users, right? So if you validate or are audited on a certain version that you need to maintain and run, we make sure that we still provide hosting for that and have you covered. Eventually, when you want to upgrade or move to a new version, we're there all steps of the way. Okay.
Great, thanks, Tyler. Our next question is, my IT group doesn't have a lot of experience with Oracle, so hosting on-prem hasn't been ideal. How does coming into HMS help that issue?
So that is a good question. The solution is basically they don't have to touch Oracle at all. So we take care of all aspects of the Oracle hosting piece. So we run the instance, we manage the memory allocation, the backups, your reloads of data. If you need to move data from production data to test data to use as a sandbox, we handle that. There's no longer I have to do import or export commands. You don't have to stop or restart the database. You don't need to apply your Oracle patches. We handle all aspects of the Oracle side. We actually have it locked down in such a way that your end users or your IT won't have access to the direct Oracle instance anyway. So we have to cover it all. So good question. Actually, I haven't heard that one.
Awesome. Another question we have is, will users have direct access to the hosted services?
So like I just mentioned on the Oracle side, the database hosting side, no. As for other aspects, yes. So DELMIAworks is primarily a Windows software suite application. So we do need to use Microsoft operating systems. So the way we handle this is we use remote desktop services pretty heavily. Generally, we would have users use the remote apps or web client option to connect, where they are specifically choosing the modules or applications that they need to use. We can also lock those down based on what they only need to use, but there's always an option available for a full desktop connection. So generally, we'd like to try and keep that more with the power users, the implementation team. Some people prefer a full desktop connection, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to provide it for all end users. But there are options to get into the server, and mostly open for like troubleshooting purposes, power users, that sort of thing. So from that regard, yes, they do have access to like the operating system level. However, the entire management of the operating system is handled by our team. So you don't need to do any Windows patching. You don't need to install printers. You don't need to edit or configure printers. Sometimes customers like to take that responsibility in their own hands just for testing purposes. Sometimes it takes kind of a hands-on approach on how you want something to come out, like formatting a report correctly or a label, where you don't always want to work with an end technician to get that done. So we give you tools to be self-servicing as well. We're building upon those apps every day. So hopefully the more need of that goes away in the future. But if you want access to it, we're going to give you access to it. At the end of the day, it's the environment for you. It's for running your business, right? If you have a business need for it, we'll provide it.
Awesome.
Next question.
Our next question is, can customers have Active Directory permissions to create Windows domain accounts?
So since we are reliant on Windows, Active Directory does come into play. Normally, HMS would host the accounts for your team. So you wouldn't necessarily have access to create the remote desktop or Active Directory accounts needed to access the environment. However, if you are using those resources on-prem today, we can set up what's called a domain trust. So it's a trust between your on-site domain and our hosted domain, in which we trust credentials and authentication from your network. So with that, it would give you the ability to control who has access from an Active Directory or remote desktop connection into the environment. rolling back a little bit to give you guys kind of high-level overview, the first layer would be an Active Directory login or remote desktop connection, whether that be signing into the remote app web page or web client page, or accessing the full desktop. From there, you would have your standard database logins with Enterprise IQ. So all handled through Security Inspector. So there's those two layers of logins. So for some customers, it does help to host their own Active Directory logins, and we just link back into your corporate network and utilize those existing logins.
So we have a question about the lift and shift. What would be a standard time scale for that?
That's a good question. Lift and shifts always are best with some tender love and kindness and time. So if you're a lift and shift customer, you're running the software already on-prem or hosting it yourself. As you know, there's a lot of different aspects of hosting that we need to make sure are covered in the hosted environment. So when we provision an environment, let's say your company signs the SOW, provide a PO, and we're ready to go. We'll build out the environment, depending on our timeline, 2 to 4 weeks. From there, we have basically the main deployment available to you. You can access the environment, access the databases, log in, test apps. From that point on, we usually call it the implementation phase, right? So if you're a new customer and you're implementing for the first time, that's the main database you're going to use for production, and you'll build it out. If you're lift and shift, we would load a copy of your existing data, and then you would use that as a sandbox environment to build out the rest of your business needs, right? If you have scanners, we need to make sure your scanners can connect. If you're using network printers, we need to make sure those connect. Testing label print reports, making sure your email works. So there's a period of time where once the environment is provisioned, that you'll have a copy of your own data to make sure all aspects are working correctly before we plan what we like to call the formal and final lift and shift. So that would be a planned date for bringing production down on site, taking that final backup and moving it to HMS. So that period of implementation does vary depending on your business needs and how big the company is, how many sites maybe. It also really depends on who we have access to at your business to help us craft out the rest of the environment. So while we handle a lot of the infrastructure pieces, we don't know everything that your business needs unless you work with us. So generally, if you have a team that's dedicated towards the lift and shift on your side, it does help speed those processes along. Generally, I get 1 or 2 main contacts for the customer that generally know the operations of your business very well. So if you have someone that's well-versed in the product today, we'll often be in touch with them, and we'll be building out an itinerary and dates along the way. In terms of a timeline, with all those kind of variables in play, the shortest lift and shift phase I've seen was probably about a month of time. The longest one being 6 months or more, right? So sometimes we have customers that they're in the process of lifting and shifting, but they're also bringing on new e-plants or new production plants, new warehouses. And so we are constantly adding and building upon the environment as we go, right? So with those things in mind, it can vary. But yeah, I would say somewhere between the 1 to 6 months is pretty fair. 1 for smaller businesses and maybe 6 months for like large enterprise environments.
Thanks, Tyler. Can you touch on how our data would be protected or separated from other customers' data and where that's stored?
So every single environment that we host is completely separate. No one in DELMIAworks has access to your data except for HMS and your own business. So we don't even provide logins for like our support teams or anything like that to your data, unless you specifically request and ask for maybe professional services to step in or provide them an account. We keep it locked down to what you need. Everyone who else would need access to the environment, basically you give us the say if they need it or not. Generally, it's professional services, like I said. We generally do not provide access or accounts to our support teams, like manufacturing support, accounting support. Generally, they will work through HMS or with you to access the environment still. And that's mostly to keep things secure and locked down. In terms of where data is being stored, every environment is completely separate from each other. So one customer does not have access to another customer's data in any case, in any way. So these are all, you could think of them more of like separate cloud environments within Outscale, right? So just because they're all hosted in Outscale, it's not like everyone's using the same interface and login. Everyone has their own access routes. And there's that VPN layer as well. Generally, we lock things down to your corporate network. So while I did touch on, we do provide access from anywhere, that is still secured with a login and password that is a sophisticated password. We do leverage TLS and SSL for those open websites. If you do not want the site open to the world, we can lock that down. But generally, they're all locked down to your corporate networks and environments. The VPN's pretty heavily in play for things like the scan guns or RT server, where we need an additional layer of security on top of it. In terms of your backups, all backups are encrypted before moving to Outscale storage. So we'll take a backup of the database directly from the Oracle server. We'll encrypt that, and then we'll move it to Outscale storage. And we separate the encryption keys and the data separately with different access routes and different keys that my team has. So they would have to basically either work through you or through us to get access, but we're always going to defer to, does the customer want that? Does the customer need that? Who are you? Who's coming in? Social engineering is a pretty popular way of getting into systems. Someone identifying themselves as a customer or who they are. We do know who our primary contacts we're working with. We will know if you're an employee of that company or not. And if we're not sure, we always follow up with our primary contacts. We're not going to second guess. If someone's asking for things like DBA, we will work through an approval process with your team to make sure that people qualified and that you expect have the access that they need. In terms of, I think that's kind of the main areas. But I do want to stress that just because everyone's hosted at Outscale, it doesn't mean that customers have access to other customers' data. Everything is locked, private. We keep things with separate accounts. And the only team on my side that has access would be HMS. And all of their security is locked up with multi-form factor authentication. And we have a pretty big vetting process in play for everybody else, right? So hope that answers the question. I tend to get a lot of more of these technical questions after people have talked to like their CSM. Obviously, if you have a technical team that is used to hosting the application, everyone's gonna have their own questions about it. So the CSMs often will pull me or another qualified engineer into the conversation if you guys have additional stuff outside of this Q&A. I know that some of these questions, like this one, can be a little bit more technically involved. So if you're looking for more specific answers, we can work through you on those things. But yeah, so just don't feel, like you aren't, if you're not, let me put it this way, if you feel like you're not getting the technical depth that you need from this, talk to your CSM and get one of us involved, and we can have that more technical in-depth conversation. Yeah. So any additional questions?
It looks like we have one more question. Can you touch on the, in terms of like a 24/7 escalation, how would that be handled, or what's the protocol around that
Yeah,
in the event
so
if you're down? Sorry.
yeah. So we have the 24/7 PagerDuty line that's available. Generally, we give this to the primary site contacts that we will be working with. This is a phone number that does ring an on-call team member at any time. So it does escalate even up to me. So in terms of escalations, that's not something that the customer necessarily has to worry about. Basically, if someone is experiencing the blocker level issue, the critical piece that maybe our monitoring didn't catch or is not something that is monitored, then that's a perfect line to use. Have your primary site or what we would deem power users ring the line that can accurately describe the issue of what's going on. It'll ring an on-call team member. Let's say they're sleeping and they miss it, it'll escalate to a level 2 and eventually to a level 3. It's very rare that we have to do a ring back, but you know, phone dialing only goes for so long on those sort of things. But generally, it's going to wake up multiple people along the way. So even if you're not really sure of what constitutes a blocker or a down situation, if you feel like you're impacted on your business, call the number. Like it's there for you to take advantage of. We just ask that, normal things like scheduling a reload or something like that, we wouldn't necessarily constitute like a blocker level issue. We have other routes of support and access for that. So we do provide support, usually not 9 to 5, it's actually 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. So we have people available for 12 hours for scheduling regular events, items, services, management pieces that you might need. And then the 24/7 number is always into play. So if something's blocking you from doing your business, call the number. Otherwise, we would just go through our regular support. We have email, our service desk, and we have a group extension line available. So we're actually going to be included. This is also new this year. So in the main dial-in number for DELMIAworks, there is a call routing queue. So we do fall under supports and services now. So cloud operations, HMS is an option, or that will be coming shortly. But basically it's our regular line, the 805-227-1122. Our extension is 553. That'll ring the HMS support group and round robin to our team members.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tyler. That is all the questions we have. Thank you to everyone who participated in our webinar today. For more information on driving success in manufacturing, please check out our webinar library and make sure to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So thanks again, Tyler. Fantastic job.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, for moderating. And thank you, everyone who joined. I look forward to having conversations with new quotes in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.